Welcome to our event today, Beyond Punishment and White Supremacy. My name is Morgan Velez-Young, and I arrive at this event as a person who serves, has been served, and explores healing and restoration in the schooling and legal system contexts. I grew up and call home this land, the Mono and Yokut land. And while this is a statewide event, it is important to recognize the ancient stewards of the land, particularly surrounding our webinar home base of Fresno State. It is not surprising that I would dedicate nearly 20 years to exploring this topic area of punishment and white supremacy, particularly in our legal system. I come through a Mexican-American second-generation mother and a mixed heritage father of the Choctaw, Cherokee, English, and Scottish people, all working class. And I walk this world as a sister and a friend to many persons who are incarcerated. Many people I love are deeply entangled with the legal system. Early on, I spent 8 years working in what is called a victim offender mediation with young people and their families in terms of and involved in theft, vandalism, and assault. I've also been on the receiving end of crimes coming through domestic violence and other forms of battery. It is incredibly relevant for all of us to consider what restoration and healing can look like and does look like around the world, as well as throughout many cities in this country. Many of us BIPOC are nervous about inviting the legal system into our intimate lives. You know, will my partner be jailed when I only want peace for me and my family? Will the person who vandalized a business actually experience accountability? These are the kinds of questions that we can answer today with our panelists, three brothers who will walk us through what alternatives to punishment and white supremacy look like throughout California. First, I will share a little bit more about our topic, and then I'll introduce you to our panelists. The connection between what is a crime and punishment is incredibly oversimplified in mainstream American culture. There are many crimes that are not crimes in past generations, and we'll continue to see changes in what we think of and call crimes in the future. Punishments too change over time, and many of us even know that there are crimes with no punishments, that those two things don't always go together. More importantly, around the globe, there are lots of places where the mainstream American idea of crime and punishment don't exist at all. The Nigerian model focuses on restitution rather than incarceration for injury. In this country, the mainstream oversimplified take on punishment and crime often curbs safety and often curbs healing. There are many examples of incongruence between crime and punishment, and certainly the bigger goal of restoration and healing for many of us working in these alternative settings. 1 in 5 persons who are behind bars, almost 500,000, are there for nonviolent drug offenses. 1 in 4 persons are behind bars in prisons for parole violations. 25% of persons in jail are there for minor misdemeanors. And even beyond these bullet-pointed statistics, what is it? Where are we going as a society when we continue to oppress persons who have committed serious offenses? When we continue the oppression, the violence, both direct and indirect, throughout their lifetime, what does that say about our collective agreement as a society? For today's event, the book that informs our discussion, Our Punitive Society, was written by Randy Sheldon and myself. And we put together 10 chapters to explore the components of the legal system to ensure that we flesh out the oversimplification and the stories not told about various features of the legal system. breaking through our own adoption of the oversimplified story about crime and punishment includes us understanding what is the ideology of punishment and what is the ideology of white supremacy, both of which are the foundation and the essence of our contemporary legal system. White supremacy, or white body supremacy, as Resme Menachem invites us to think about, can be pointed to with statistics and research and reviews of legal content. White body supremacy has white Americans trade their freedom for privilege and fragility. The same crimes across different bodies show this privilege. Excellent, careful research shows us that such things as the death penalty and the severity of punishments follow the trends of stereotypical racialized features and lightness to darkness of skin tones. White body supremacy uses media and socializing norms and institutions to reinforce an invented hierarchy where Black and brown bodies are the appropriate ones for the harshest of punishments. The generational reinforcement of punishment as a gold standard for infractions deemed to be criminal. These are the essential features of Eurocentric courts that were first implemented, which first terrorized minorities and women and the poor on European soil. And then these were transplanted into North America, where the terrorism was then implemented against Native bodies and Black bodies. It is vital that we understand that this hundreds of years of practice in implementing the punishment ideology and the white supremacy ideology have become so normalized to us, we don't recognize it in the thousands of procedures and practices and professions that comprise today's legal system. Our panelists will teach us about alternatives to these ideologies. They will show us about healing and restoration and education and opportunities to accessing new lives. Before I introduce our three panelists, let me say thank you to the Community Alliance newspaper and its investigative journalism. Today's event honors investigative journalism and in collaboration with Eduardo Stanley, editor, and Waveland Press, we are excited to offer the first 10 people who are attending today to contribute $15 or more to the Community Alliance newspaper to receive the book in the mail, Our Punitive Society. And I'm going to share a slide with you so that you can see how you can take advantage of the opportunity. So here you can visit fresnoalliance.com/subscribe, give toward our regional investigative journalism, and they will, in collaboration with Waveland Press, provide you a copy in the mail of Our Punitive Society. I'll share the same information again at the end of our webinar today. Now let me introduce to you our wonderful three panelists. And although many of you know a little bit about them because you did register for this event, and I'm sure you're looking forward to meeting them, I will say a few things about each. So let me start with Richard Cruz. He's joining us out of the Bay Area with the HIMSA Collective. And Richard is going to carry with him the contributions of his ancestors as well, the Sioux of the Montana people. And he brings deep knowledge around what restoration and healing looks like in community spaces, as well as in collaboration with institutions. Jaime Leyva is joining us out of the Fresno area, and he represents COSA and the Community Justice Center. Jaime, Mr. Leyva, is going to bring us insights into what it looks like to lead programming and walk alongside persons as they get to transform the opportunities ahead of them. And Andrew Wynn is joining us from the Sacramento area. Andrew has been working as and with college students with criminal records for several years. And Andrew gets to help educate us on what it looks like to implement restoration, education, and access for opportunities with this specific group of persons who are in the college space. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And before we launch into a full discussion, it would be wonderful if you can help each of you just for a moment paint a picture for the audience of what it looks like to, in terms of the programs that you lead and or the persons you get to serve, what it looks like in a basic sense to have restorative programming, healing programming, educational programming, anything in that helps the audience get a little bit more concrete. And Richard, can we start with you?
Yeah, so thank you all for being here, and thank you for the questions and just the platform to speak about this. And so what it looks like for me is the healing is a very deep relational thing, very deep and relational, and it's like giving back somebody their agency. That's what it looks like to us. And through our programs, we do what's, for lack of a better word, victim offender dialogue. And we have restorative justice in the community. And I think the second one really fits into this more so, is that it's the community healing the community and not calling the police or the criminal justice system that's set up today, and having us come out and talk to the people that have been harmed, and see what they need and what they want out of the process, not what the criminal justice system or somebody else says, but really giving back that own agency. And that for me is very empowering and very equalizing across all boards. And so it feels really, really great to be in that process and to see outcomes of people getting healing instead of punishment or retribution for what has happened to them.
Thank you. Thank you. Jaime, can you help us as well understand or paint a picture for us?
Yes, here in Fresno, COSA, we provide, we deal with individuals that re-enter in society. What we do, what's so unique about our organization, is that we provide a circle of support for individuals that are re-entering society, so they instantly get a support network. And the support network, they meet once a week, commitment for 1 year. And at the end of the day, the goal is for them to develop relationships and connections to the community. You know, we all know the story about people getting out and just getting resources and information, and here, have at it, right? But when you've been incarcerated for decades, you need a little bit more than that. You need that network to feel like you are a part of, and to feel a little sense of being human and what it means to be human out here in society. Because we all know the institution does kind of the opposite, and every day, everything that's in there is towards dehumanizing a person and taking the person's dignity. The circle of support and accountability, you're welcome with open arms, smiles, and your dignity is given back. Richard touched on the fact that we empower individuals to have that sense of agency. So, and we just don't point them in the right direction. We walk alongside them at every step. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. And Andrew, can you help also provide a visual for the audience to think about what your work looks like?
Yes, thank you for having me here. At Project Rebound, we do a number of different things. One of the things that we try to accomplish is to create a prison to school pipeline, so those who are leaving prison have the opportunity to attend an institution of higher education like Sacramento State or Fresno State or any of the other campuses with the Project Rebound or underground scholars on. in this, we tried to create equitable access for students who face legal and systemic barriers that are based in white supremacy ideologies. Part of that is, including advocating for students when there are barriers presented in front of them. There's one major in particular that will request students travel to, beyond the 50-mile barrier, the limits from outside the county, and Project Rebound will go ahead and advocate for those students who need to go ahead and have access to the classroom or even work with their parole agents. We do a pretty good job of straddling the fence between being a state agency at some level, but also being very grounded in community work. And so we try to leverage our position within the state of California to uplift those who have been marginalized systemically and legally.
Thank you. Thank you to the three of you for laying the groundwork for moving into our deeper conversation. So in case it's not, we have a range of attendees, right? And so in case it's there's enough of us who are watching who are not familiar beyond values, beyond ideals of why dignity and community-led healing are important, right? Sometimes those can be, we can have a superficial understanding of what those mean. So can the three of you walk us through from perhaps a lens of like quality of life, right? And really break down, what does dignity mean when you're actually walking alongside communities and individuals and families? What is the quality of life frame of mind or lens, not as a simplified, I'm a good person, so I like to support dignity, but the very human experience. Why does it matter for those who are harmed directly or indirectly by what might some call a crime? What is the quality of life argument for serving folks who are harmed? What is the quality of life argument for folks who have been the ones responsible or accountable for harming? So maybe we can unfold that a little bit more. And any one of you, please go ahead and jump in with whoever you think would lead that conversation best.
Yeah, I would love to start off and get the low-hanging fruit from this one. And so the quality of life, I think, for somebody who's been harmed or who has done the harm, stems out of choice. And like what I said earlier about agency is what is at the root of our our value at AHIMSA. And when we go into a VOD process or we go into an RJC process, restorative justice community process, is when somebody contacts us that's been harmed, it's their choice. And that's the quality of life, letting somebody choose. For instance, if you have somebody that is suffering homelessness, is like not just buying stuff for them, but giving them the money so they have the dignity to go buy stuff themselves. And so it's the same premise in our process of when we go to somebody who's been harmed and they have called us and we ask them and we keep asking, what do you want out of this process? What does your healing look like? And so it keeps putting that agency back in their hands, and that quality of life, is theirs to figure out, not for me to tell them. And so, and it goes to the person who did the harm too. Also, like, what do they want from the process? What do they need to have some healing? And it looks different for each person, regardless of who you are, what side of the harm you're on. Everybody is different, and it's not a one size fits all like the criminal justice system and the white supremacy model puts us in. It's like punishment solves everything. That's not true. We found out of going to individuals and find out, what do they really want? Sometimes they want to know why. Sometimes they want this person to come and explain to them. Sometimes we even hear, I just want them away from me, but I don't want them locked up. And so how do we do that in a way that serves that person and not in a way that we think it should go, or or the system thinks it should go? So that's the quality of life, I think, is what gives back in our work.
The quality of life. So $200 gate money and a destination. So you could just imagine, especially after decades of incarceration, fear, anxiety, unknown. You have all this that's happening to this individual. He's being exposed to things that he hasn't experienced in decades. His mind is expanding so fast that he can't even think straight. So, I mean, it's overwhelming to say the least. But if you have someone there, that if you have the understanding that someone's there to pick you up at the gate, if you have the understanding that somebody's going to be there to guide you, to even navigate a phone, to even navigate that card they give you, your debit card, to go in there and use the computer, the keypad. So the less anxieties, the less stress, the less fears that a person experiences, I mean, on a personal level, I mean, the quality of life just keeps shooting up, So as opposed to feeling like you're in a hole trying to peek out at the world, you're actually outside, walking in the crowd and experiencing this whole new world. Sometimes maybe for the first time as a positive pro-social individual that feels a sense of I belong here, as opposed to prior to incarceration, he was living a lifestyle that was marginalized, he was living in the shadows. So now he is a part of, and he's not only walking this alone, but he's walking this with the support, people that are walking alongside him. So, you could just, I can't put words in anybody's mouth, but, I'm formerly incarcerated. I knew what it meant for me to have that support and to know that I can lean on other people to whenever I had a question. And believe me, I had a question about everything. How do you even turn the phone on? What do I do with this card, this little plastic card? What is it? Do I swipe it? Do I plug it in? And when it starts beeping, do I run? Do I prone out? Or is it just letting me know that my transaction was completed? So, the quality of life just shoots up when those anxieties and those stress and that fear goes down.
Yeah, and for us, quality of life, kind of right back to what Richard was saying, is really holistic, right? Like it's being able to have the autonomy over your own body and mind, to be able to decide what you want to do next in your life, right? So for instance, for me, I consider, for Project Rebound students, what is post-graduation success, right? What does that look like for our students? And how I define it and programmatically is like post-graduation success is a student doing exactly what they want to do after graduation. That's the success. Now, it's not up to me to determine what that will look like for that individual. It's up to that person to figure that out for themselves. I'm only here to help them to have that conversation, to facilitate the space to go ahead and look at that a little more closely. And so in terms of quality of life, it could be learning how to navigate complex social systems that are based in white supremacy, so that they can go ahead and create themselves a foundation of economic prosperity, and be able to take care of themselves and their family and their loved ones and anybody else that they choose to, because now that they have this formal training, from an institution of higher education, to be able to navigate these spaces. And so quality of life for us, at least at Project Rebound, is certainly student-centered. And allowing the student to decide that for themselves. And it really just goes back to basically what Richard and Jaime had just stated, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. The three of you communicated to us about, in one way or the other, that there's a contrast between agency and the lack of agency. And so perhaps there are some in our audience who are not familiar with what does it mean to lack agency, either in an institutional setting and in a community setting as well. What does it look like in a concrete way? And what are, Andrew used the word barriers. What are obvious barriers that press on a person's or a community's or a family's ability to have agency? So can you speak with us a little bit more about contrasting agency and lack of agency?
Yeah, so agency to me and is choice, and it goes deeper than just a choice of like what is right and what is wrong. It's like, what are the choices I have in front of me? And that's all been determined by white supremacy. It's like I hear a lot in the world of like, oh, it's all about choice. You made a choice to commit this crime, so we're going to lock you up. However, or you had a choice. You could have went to college. Where I grew up, that was not a choice. In my economic conditions, college was not a choice for me. College was not a choice for me. Getting a job was not a choice for me. Those weren't choices when I was a young person for me. And so it's like, yes, people have good choices and some people only have bad choices. So the agency would be of me getting back and be able to make my own choices, not based on what's white supremacies and the beliefs that they have instilled in this community. And what I mean by that is like, if a crime happens, this community and this culture here says you should be punished. That's a deep-rooted belief. And that choice has been taken away from me, ingrained in me since I was a child, that anytime something happens, you call the cops and they punish that person. So I have no agency over that choice because that belief has been instilled in me. And so when we say agency, it's about educating somebody about how all these things, these internal and external things have been imposed on us, and we've been oppressed by them. And then we internalize that oppression and we believe it. And we make choices based on that. And so how do we educate people to recognize this, know this, and start unfolding and untangling all that and making choices for themselves? That's what we call agency. It's 100%, it's 200% truth of, yes, you committed a harm, and there was also and society's also responsible for putting you in that situation. Those are 200% truths. And so that's what we mean when we talk about agency, is getting back that choice, getting able to think about your own, who you are and what your beliefs are and what your choices are outside of this culture, this American white supremacy culture.
Yeah, I'll kind of step in here. So yeah, for us, Richard really did a good job of like touching on some of this, but for us, a lot of students, at least by the time they come to me, are already conditioned, right, to believe certain things about themselves. And so, as somebody who's helping them kind of have access to a university, I'm also trying to help them have access to themselves, right? In that process. And so it's like, hey, I get told all the time, and I'm just gonna use this as an example. In no way am I trying to like go after a particular career, but I hear a lot of times, particularly amongst previously incarcerated people, is that, oh, I want to become a drug counselor. By the time they get into higher education, the only and I get it, and I get why they say, oh, I want to be a drug counselor, right? Because like the only people they know with college degrees tend to be drug counselors, right? People who actually go and work at a desk every day tend to be drug counselors, right? And so we're conditioned as previously incarcerated people, like, how do we get an office job? Become a drug counselor. And so I'm not trying to steer people away from that, but I'm also trying to say, hey, look, there are other options that you can do, and you can feel good about doing it and be able to support yourself and be able to grow, right? Like a drug counselor is very rewarding. It's a very important career. I get that. I do. But it's also important for the person to take care of themselves, right? We can take care of other people and we can do all this stuff, but being able to take care of yourself in this, right? Like I think goals can align if students and previously incarcerated people and other marginalized groups go ahead and take the time to kind of really sit with that. The other part of it is licensing, right? Like I can't tell you how many people I come across and they're like, well, I'm going to be a drug counselor because at least I can pass KDAC. You're like, okay, that's great. But what about the bar, right? What about, your LCSW, or what about some of these other licensings, right? And I get it, right? To become an attorney, to get into law school, to get, there's these barriers, or these systemic barriers saying, hey, do you have a conviction history? Last year in California, Sacramento State's Project Rebound and Root and Rebound and some other agencies got together and we passed SB 118, and we were able to get it through the legislature as a trailer bill, which basically banged the box in higher education. Like, we literally have to make laws to go ahead and allow students to have a self-agency. And so to be able to say, hey, you know what, we can go ahead and open up these things, right? And so these barriers to licensing, these barriers to education, we start addressing them one by one. And although we're very far from a utopia or a perfect society in terms of like barriers, we're very far from it. We are knocking them down one by one in the work that we do. And I mean, even this year, we are trying to put guardrails up for institutions of higher education trying to enter our prisons, right? We don't want just any for-profit institution trying to go into a prison and try to exploit currently incarcerated people for their Pell Grant access, right? And so we're currently trying to even address that, right? Making sure that students or prospective students have the ability to have access to high quality education. So it's not even just saying, hey, it's barriers to entering the system. It's also saying, hey, once you're in these systems, you're going to be treated with, the same type of opportunities that people who are not incarcerated are receiving. And that's part of like what we try to do with agency and lack of agency is being able to have students determine their own pathways, be able to help them on their career pathways, being able to get them through the licensing, broader ideas of what career pathways are in front of them, and then just getting out of this white supremacist conditioning, right? And getting out of the conditions that they've been told, right, through language, right? It's never just being called inmate one time, right? That really bothers people. It's that conditioning of being called inmate 1,000 times over, right? It's that conditioning of being called convict 1,000 times over. And so it's also being able to undo that conditioning that students have faced or previously incarcerated people have faced as a result of a legalized and systemic label. So yeah, thank you for answering or asking that question.
Thank you, Andrew. And Jaime, as a counselor that Andrew spoke to a little bit, and I saw you laughing. I'd love to have your understanding of in your role how you see folks move through lack of agency and agency at different times, and sometimes repeating depending on the system that is poking at them or engaging them.
Yes. So the way I'm thinking it is no agency is a parolee just coming out here and saying, you know what, I'm gonna just stay under the radar, keep my nose clean, and get off parole. Hopefully the sooner the better. No agency, right? Because they're falling under the parameters of what the parole system is today. However, here at COSA, we encourage individuals to live your life. Live your life. What are your goals? What's going on? So agency is like pursuing those goals. And so you have these limitations on parole. So challenge them a little bit. challenge them in a good way. Push those boundaries out, because it's only going to allow you to be a better person. Don't allow them to be restricted. And, things are happening to guys that are on parole right now that have never been heard of. We got guys coming out now that are still on parole, that are actually working inside a prison institution. You got guys that are still on parole today because they have agency. They push for something better. They push to go and facilitate back into the institutions while on parole. They get jobs that they never thought they were going to have while on parole. And jobs that their parole officer said, there's no way in hell you're going to get that job. And because they had a sense of who they were and they believed in and they pushed, they have the jobs that, that people are surprised that they have today, because, and while being on parole. So having no agency is just going through the motions, listening to, of course you want to abide by all your parole conditions, and, but you do want to live into your experience as a free individual.
Thank you. And all three of you collaborate in small ways and in large ways with institutions, right? With Andrew, it's a little more obvious, the Cal State system, but you also have other partnerships and collaborations. With the IHIMSA collective, it's huge mission, means it must collaborate in certain ways, but is so careful to do it on its own terms. And Jaime, I know about the community justice centers, collaborations with community-based nonprofits, as well as county departments and so forth. Can the three of you share how, maybe if it's okay, paint a picture, how do you collaborate with institutions that are themselves co-opted into the punishment gold standard and or the white supremacy standard that forces a Eurocentric, narrow understanding of humanity? How do you work with those institutions to do restorative work, to do education work, right? How do you do that?
I think, for us, it's super easy, right? Not super easy. It has its challenges, but we really have, as a state agency or state funded program, we just go in there and say, hey, this is what we're able to do. And I just remember where I was going with it. Super easy, because I think the work speaks for itself, right? I think at the end of the day, sorry, I lost track and I'm back on track again, but basically the work speaks for itself, right? By the time we go in there and we're talking with the incarcerated people, right? And we go in there, we're working with them and they see what we do, right? The administrators, the correctional officers, the free staff, and everybody else who's a part of this prison, they're seeing what we're doing, right? We're never alone when we're in there. We're always escorted. There's always somebody on the other side of the glass looking at us, or there's a camera somewhere, right? And they're witnessing the transformative powers of what it's like to go inside a prison and just talk with people, right? And say, hey, look, this is an opportunity for you, right? And this is what the opportunity goes looks like, right? And so I go in prisons and say, hey, look, this is what higher education looks like for somebody with a determinate sentence, and this is what higher ed looks like for somebody with an indeterminate sentence, right? And we just try to have that discussion. And at the end of the day, right, people are going back to their cells or going back to their normal lives within prison, and they're choosing like these pathways, like, oh, okay, I'm consciously not going to get involved in this kind of drama. I'm just going to go ahead and shut up and just keep on moving, right? And so what's happening is inside prisons, the culture is changing, right? It's not the same way as it was when I was in there in like 2003, 2004, right? And in 2007, some of these other times I was inside, right? It's not necessarily the same place. I go into Pelican Bay today, and these men are very kind, generous, respectful. They even held a presentation where they allowed themselves to be vulnerable.
Which men are you referring to?
Correctional? The men inside Pelican Bay State Prison.
The persons behind bars.
Yes, the incarcerated, the men. And so, you know, and so by just changing, you know, the culture inside prisons, administration and correctional officers are seeing it, right? Some are have held on, are still holding on to old ideas, but there are plenty in there that are holding on to these new ideas and seeing the changes and willing to make accommodations to bring in more programming. I literally had somebody from headquarters call my phone 4 weeks ago and say, "Hey, we have a prison, and the associate warden wants Project Rebound in there so that they can go ahead and do more programming." And so these phone calls are happening more based on the culture that is changing and shifting inside, based on the work of Richard, based on the work of Jaime, and so many other places and people, right? Like Place for Grace, Anti-Racism Coalition, and a bunch of other nonprofit organizations that are just really doing the work every day inside. So thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, how I collaborate with institutions, it's hard. I mean, because I want to abolish them. I don't want them to exist. And so I changed my belief around like how I look at it is I want the prison system gone. I want everybody out. I want them to figure out a way that heals and doesn't keep harming. And so I always, when it gets hard for me, I tell myself this starfish story of this little girl walking on the beach with her mother, and there's thousands of starfish on the beach, and she keeps picking one up at a time, throwing them back in the water. And her mom's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well, I'm throwing the starfish back in the water so he can live." And she goes, "Well, what does it matter? You got thousands of matters." She says, "It matters to this one." And she throws it back in. And so I always tell myself that story when it gets hard. And when I say it's hard, is like the ethics of working with an institution is hard. Like I look at the funding. If we get funding from CDCR, we get funding from any institution, I look at it as reparations. Like you need to give this money back to the community-based organizations, so we can heal our people. And then you know, and then there's also that the piece of me that humanizes the people that actually work for these institutions, and like looking at them as survivors of white supremacy and this culture at the same time. They're trying to survive in it just like we're trying to survive in it. And either whether they know or they don't know, they still have to survive. And so I look at that, and I'm formerly incarcerated, did 30 years, and I had very similar moments with staff in there to where we'd be very humanizing of each other until one of their superiors walked in. Then you would see like basically white supremacy come in the door, and they had to change up because they're worried about their job, their family, and how are they going to survive? And so they would have to dehumanize me in that moment because this person came in the door with this rank or this hierarchy. And so that's how I like, oh, okay, so there is a humanistic way here. And then, you know, that helps me, you know, arrive at a way of emotionally going in, and we provide groups that actually teach about, you know, white supremacy, hierarchies, and gender equality and everything else when we go inside. And so that's what helps me go in there, and then seeing the change that's coming about in the culture of the prisons, as Andrew was talking about, is like we changed the whole culture of a prison yard through, you know, becoming a community in there and really looking at each other, not each other's crimes, but looking at each other as humans. And like, oh, the person isn't what they did. This is a person. And you're never the best thing you ever did or the worst thing you ever did. You're still a person. And then I also live with the piece of, this is a big culture change, and I'm probably not going to see this whole culture change in my lifetime. And I'm okay with that, just planting seeds.
Okay, so let me take a stab at this. So how do we collaborate? I think honestly, like it's been a topic here at the office at the CJC, and just simply on some of the forms that we get from the institutions, it has, you know, inmate, perpetrator, offender, stuff like that. So even changing the way the forms are, as opposed to labeling that person this, what can we use? What kind of language can we use that's going to be more, going more restorative, more towards the healing, as opposed to the labeling, the way things have been. Even when you're measuring, Andrew touched on it a little bit earlier, when you measure success, like how do you measure success, right? Who decides who gets to measure success, right? The person does. But yet the measuring stick that we're using for that, who put that in place, right? Who put that in place? So yeah, it's just like, that's the only thing that came to mind on my part. And working with parole officers, that's like the most challenging, because it's like you get those glimpses of these parole officers, and you see that they genuinely care about the individual. However, how Rich touched on it, something happens that they just switch over back to being a parole officer and doing what the system does, which is dehumanize individuals, and they easily fall back into that. So how can we support and nurture that experience when we get those glimpses of when a parole officer is actually humanizing the parolee? And just maximize on that.
Thank you. A thread that has run through some of the things that you're walking us through has been about the body. And this is only a topic that Richard and I have chatted about in the past. Andrew, though, you also stated a phrase, how do I help people access themselves? Which really resonates with what it means for individuals to deprogram or reprogram themselves when they have heard the same label over and over and over for years, or they've seen the same forms, Jaime, to your point, the same forms that they fill out, right? Oh, every time someone needs something from them, there's a form to fill out and check a box. And that language, right, mirrors back the white supremacy ideology. Our interaction with forms, with language, with names that are applied to us. I know, Richard, you can, but it would be wonderful to hear from all three of you. What does your work look like, your collaborations with individuals look like, to address how much our bodies carry the oppressive features of chronic punishment from communities and from experience with communities who face systemic oppression, but also for individuals who have experienced incarceration. Richard, are you willing to?
Oh, okay. I was just making room to see if anybody else wanted to go first. Yeah. So, like, I think really, like how our bodies hold the trauma that is, white supremacy like we could go into this all day long and talk about this. I mean, just me alone, like how my body has held, the trauma of being incarcerated, or the trauma of being in this light skin now with this white supremacy that's out here, in this culture that's out here, is as I walk through this life, this body has become, basically like a harm to some others. And what I mean by that is, like, some women may be offended by just the fact that I'm walking around as a male, because of the things that have traumatized them in this culture, and this rape culture, and this white supremacy culture. And so being very aware of that, and how do I now walk through the world with not my intent, but my impact of just being in this body. And so, what is it that I do is I ask people what they want instead of assuming what they need or what they want. And so it's always about asking, always about giving back agency. And my body holds a lot of trauma also from being incarcerated. I have a lot of PTSD, and it comes out in the way of how I see the world now. Is I see things that other people who haven't suffered the same kind of trauma as me don't see. Like when I walk into Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, I see people who I label as gang members, who I label as people stalking people out to harm them. I see all these things and my anxiety goes up. And the people with me don't see it. They just see my reactions to it. And I hold that in my body all the time. Whether I'm walking around, I hear a noise or I hear, a loud noise. It was funny yesterday, actually, somebody had a ringtone that sounded like an alarm in a prison. And we were a room full of people were formerly incarcerated, having a circle, and this ringtone goes off, and we just stopped, and all of us went to jump on the damn floor. And it was, we hold this inside of us still. And so just these things, our body reacts, even though our minds are like, this isn't real. We still hold that trauma, and the body keeps going. And, it's going to take a long time to heal from that. So, yeah.
So how do we support those to identify that?
Yeah. So thank you, Richard. Yeah. Jaime, what is your experience walking alongside folks? There's not just the access to opportunities, right? And the restoration activities, but there's the body experience as well, as Richard outlined. Can you share anything about folks that you walk alongside?
Sure. Yeah. We have a core member that was that had 25 years to life. Sentence was he got resentenced under the felony murder law, and he was released. So he had minimal self-help group, minimal experience working on himself. So he didn't have that emotional awareness that a lot of the guys develop going through self-help, doing the introspection, doing all that. So he was just literally plucked from prison, and now he's out in free society. So complete culture shock. So for him, it was just being able to identify what's happening in his body, to tune in to what's happening. And Richard identified it. You go to a place and you start identifying people. You start labeling people. You start and so we ask questions like, why is that important for you? Because it allows me to feel safe, right? It allows me to feel safe. The more information that I can gather from any situation, the safer I feel. And then I'm able to navigate that environment as it comes. So how we walk alongside with them is just being able to name it. What's going on? Name it, identify it, and what are you doing to challenge on a personal level? What are you doing to challenge that thinking behind the thinking? And replace that. How can we support you? And what do you think is going to be healthy for you to replace that with? And it's just developing a new narrative in their mind and reinforcing it. Every time you go somewhere, just keep reinforcing it in your mind and just create a new norm as best you can. I mean, we had that one guy, he even just going to the store and the variety of stuff to choose from was overwhelming. And he just froze. Now he can walk into Costco and not be so triggered because of the work he's done on himself.
Yeah, I think for us, working with previously incarcerated students, like a lot of what we do is just sitting down and listening. We find it incredibly important to hear where people are coming from, who have experiences of incarceration, and being able to, have real honest evaluations, with the student. And so, for instance, I find myself saying things to students that, other people will not, right? And it's because even though like I am previously incarcerated, the privilege is, as a previously incarcerated person, I can say things about the experience that other people cannot when talking with students one-on-one. An example of this is like, hey, if a student starts explaining to me that they're experiencing mental health issues, then I can go ahead and just say, hey, you know what, I also have mental health issues. And then just start, and just indulge a level of honesty and truthfulness that I hope to get out of a student. And so I expose that part about myself, that vulnerability about myself, so that the student also can feel all right with also exposing their own vulnerabilities, right? So this is a process that we do together, and it's just a conversation, right? And we've even had to, and normally these conversations are one-on-one, and we really get down to it because, as we know, it's like communication is more than just words, more than just like gestures with our hands. There are feelings that come with it. And so I really try to get down to some of this emotional stuff, like these feelings, and just like what drives you to don't think that you're deserving of something, right? And I want to know why somebody may not feel deserving of something. And so I constantly find myself saying phrases like, I appreciate you, you earned that, you deserve good things. And I literally, I find myself saying those phrases, those three in particular, on an everyday basis when I'm having interaction with students, because we want to, at least I want to, undo some of the things that they've been told, that they're not deserving of good things, that they don't belong on a college campus, or they don't belong in a certain space. That that they have value as just a person, not as a student, not as an incarceration person or whatever. They have inherent value as a person in their humanity. And so really, that process is really, talking to them and just reaffirming that they deserve to be centered in the process. That, like giving back and going to school and, volunteering or participating in this or that, that's great and all, but I really want students to, marginalized students particularly, to center themselves in this process, because they're worthy of it, right? People are worthy of having good things. Jeff Bezos is not the only person deserving of good things. Every one of us on this panel, everyone as an attendee, we all deserve it, and we all fall short of of our own expectations of ourselves, but we still deserve good things. And so that's really like a lot of the process that we try to reiterate to students who've gone through a process like incarceration, that they can go ahead and start valuing themselves. And it's important, like people like us on campuses start valuing our students' presence, right? Our students are the university's best option, right? It's changing that dynamic, right? It is not when we select students to attend universities, that is the best that university has, right? And so I want students to realize that when they get accepted to university campuses or experiences other or places of privilege, that they really deserve that. And even attending college is a privilege, and sometimes students don't feel they deserve that. They're like, I don't belong here, and they're told that, right? Like, oh, college students are going, previously incarcerated people are going on college campuses, right? People are hear that, and they instantly feel angst, like, I work every day. My son can't go to college for free, right? We hear these narratives that constantly challenge that people deserve good things. I think that person's college son or daughter who should go to college. And I do believe it should be free, but I also believe that, people with conviction history should also have access to college. And so, yes, we talk about the access, but it's just being able to undo all those little things that really just challenges people from allowing themselves from experiencing good things. We need to just be able to have that experience.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about what reprogramming or deprogramming looks like in the heart. Particularly for Richard and Jaime, we're coming closer to our end of our conversation time. But for Richard and Jaime in particular, in the community context, can you two share a little more with the audience about what has surprised you the most in terms of implementing restoration, implementing healing, that you didn't know would be part of your work when you first got started in restorative programming? What surprised you the most in terms of its impact?
So what has surprised me the most is going through these processes of RJ and our victim offender dialogues and RJ in the community is the compassion for people, like just going to somebody for the first time and them contacting us and wanting to talk to the person that murdered their father or murdered their mother or murdered somebody, and them coming to us for the first time and just asking that question that we keep asking, why do you want this and what do you want? And hearing the compassion, like, I want this person just to get out of prison and to live a good life. And like, where does that come from? Like, I want to be that person right there. Like, I'm like, damn, that's the person my dog wants me to be. And so like, when I hear that, I'm like, damn, like this person is so compassionate, and just the love in their face that they're willing to give somebody who did such a harm to them. It astounds me every time, and I'm just awed by it. And watching somebody go through that process of whether they actually meet that person or they don't, or they just go through a surrogate process, or just the deep understanding and the forgiveness or just the accountability they get, is an aha moment for me every time. Just to witness it is great, and seeing how each person gets humanized, and it isn't about what they did, but like coming back as a human, and seeing that person again instead of what they did to me, but as a human who has faults, who's done wrong things, but is still lovable, I can still give compassion to. And then there's the willingness to get vulnerable. Like, this has surprised me every time, and Andrew hit on it earlier, is when we get in a circle or we get in a group or we just get on a one-on-one, and if I share something vulnerable about myself and get really authentic and go deep, how it opens the doors for others to do the same thing. And it's just like, in the relationship that builds, how quickly that can happen when we just are honest and authentic and vulnerable with each other, astounds me every time. I'm like, this is the great work, and I love that. And the impact it has on our communities is like, it takes away this belief that the system has a way to heal us, when like the system keeps us safe, or he keeps us safe. And it gives back this belief of like, we keep us safe, we do our healings. And so we don't need this system. Like, we can do this ourselves. And so based on that, it just like, and how, and like, even like how the system and the criminal justice system re-traumatizes everybody, whole society, the person who did the harm, the person who was harmed, their families, everybody out there gets traumatized by the system, including the police officers. Like, everybody gets traumatized by this system. And so when I see the light bulbs go off and people realize what the hell's going on and what they've been taught, those are moments that I love. And so, go ahead, Jaime.
Thank you, Richard. I think for me, the biggest thing that surprised me is the level of resiliency, not only from the people that experienced the harm, because like Richard said, you come across people that have been, honestly, they had it bad. Their experience was terrible. However, they just want that person to move forward and not cause harm to someone else. So on that end, but also resiliency on the individual that committed the crime or committed the sexual harm or the harm, their level of resiliency about taking responsibility, taking ownership, and doing stuff to live right from that day forward, and do their very best to not only not create more harm, but to allow themselves to feel like, you know what, I do deserve to live a good life, even in spite or whatever. And the biggest thing is the ripple effect of the healing. It's not just, I mean, we just finished the VOD, or not finished the VOD, but we participated in the VOD this morning, and it just like, you just see it, like you just see the ripple effect affect the people that are real near it in a way that's so healing for everyone. And the level when that comes, you see the resiliency in individuals, and then it leans into being more compassionate, being more vulnerable, and then that leads into something else, and then so it just kind of the ripple effect, and you're just connecting relationships. People are reconnecting. People are reconnecting with themselves. People are reconnecting with family members, with community. So I mean, that's what it's pretty amazing, and just to be a part of that, and to be impacted, yeah, that surprised me though. And also on the flip side, I don't want to end on that note, on a negative note, but it surprises me that we've been using a system that's broken, that everybody admits is broken, but we're still using the damn system. Like, so what needs to change? Who needs to change it? But I don't know, so, but this is the system we're in. Yeah.
Thank you, Jaime. As we get closer to our last few minutes, Jaime, you actually bring us to one of the questions that I wanted to ask all three of you, that I think the audience will benefit from. What is the importance of the audience hearing from you today? What is the importance of the audience learning about alternatives to punishment and white supremacy? Why do we all need to learn more about these things that exist beyond punishment and white supremacy? And maybe we can go through our established flow of Richard, Jaime, and Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, so like we have set up a system here with the HIMSA to where the community calls us. The police aren't called. And so when they call us, we go out and we don't report. We don't report to the cops what harms that people have given to us to, for lack of a better word, mediate between them to see what they want. And so what it does is like, it shows, and then each one of those processes is not the same. Every one of them is different. And so it shows a completely different way of doing things outside of the system that empowers people. And it's not a one size fits all model. every harm that we deal with is different, and what people want is different. And so it really teaches and shatters that belief, like the criminal justice system is a one size fits all thing and it fixes everything. When, like Jaime was saying, in reality, if you look at the numbers, harm hasn't gone down, crime hasn't gone down, nothing has gone down, the system doesn't work, but yet we still use it. And so the one thing that I could say is, like, if we could get into the community and the community could base itself, like we've been doing this before colonization came. We were doing our own things here in this country and on this land. We didn't need this. And so I think that is the thing, is to destroy that belief that this system works somehow. Like, that is my whole thing about what this community, what this panel is about, is like getting back to the belief of, like, there are other alternatives. In India, I'm just going to give a couple examples. In India, some of our people went to do a training, and we asked the native people of India, like, what do you do when a harm's committed? They go, and the person with the most resources throws a party for 4 days. They never talk about the harm. They celebrate that time spent together heals. Totally outside of Western cultural thinking, where we have to talk about it, we have to go to a therapist or something to deal with it, or I have to be accountable. Like, and that does the healing. In a tribe up in Canada, Mary and Faith came down and visited us and blew my whole Western thinking out the window. Of, they were talking about how they deal with harms up there in the community. And, you know, it was something of, it was a domestic violence harm that they were talking about. And then I said, well, how do you deal with murder? And they said, we don't have murders. And they go, hold on, we've had one. It was an outsider that came in. And I was like, well, what did you do? I was waiting to hear, like, oh, we flew her family in to figure it out. Totally blew my mind. I'm thinking in the Western culture, and like, this is a whole new way of thinking. And so that's what I would like the audience to, like, get outside the box of this Western culture of what we've been taught, and let's see what we can do.
I think, you know, simply put, to keep it short and sweet, it works. They work. These, because like Richard said, it takes you out of that cookie cutter process that happens when you go into the system, and it really, like, you take in what's in front of you individually. Every situation is unique, and you address it. However, it's going to be different every time. And that's what these community-based organizations do. We see the person, and we see the relationship. And then we work on that. That's what we work on. And, you know, a lot of the times it's the person driving the process. So what are the needs? Not what we think the needs are, but what are the needs that need to be identified. We'll collaborate with the individual, with the harm happened or whatever. And then you just move forward in that. And that's what these organizations do. They really personalize everything. You know, I know we could speak for ours. We really get down to the bottom of what's happening, what was going on, what was the need, and how can we help you address that need? And in the best interest of you, in relation to community in relation to you.
Yeah, I think, you know, beyond, you know, what we should learn beyond like white supremacy is that, you know, not every situation is dichotomous, right? I think, you know, one of the things is, you know, we know that things, there is a gray area, right? There's a lot of gray area in life, and that things are not static, but dynamic in character, and that, you know, as long as like groups like the ones that are represented here today and others, you know, continue to do the work that they're able to do, I think we start demystifying what white supremacy is, right? Because I think a lot of, or not demystifying what white supremacy is. Let me take that back. But I think just being able to understand what white supremacy is, right? I think, you know, when people hear the words, they automatically assume that it always benefits white people. And that's not always the case, right? I think when we talk about white supremacy, I think a lot of people have bought into the notion that, you know, it only it only benefits white supremacy. And yet there is a group of white people inside prisons today who are literally collateral damage into the war on BIPOC people, right? We know that. And so it's not even working for those who identify as being white. And I think that's also something to kind of take away from it as well, which is that it's not working even for the people that it says it's supposed to work for.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more follow-up question, but before I do that, I'm going to be able to screen share the opportunity to give to the Community Alliance in case the 10 books haven't been taken just yet. I told the audience that I would do that. So I'm going to put that up as we are inching to the end of our time. So folks can see that fresnoalliance.com/subscribe, giving to our regional investigative journalism benefits all of us. And so going to the link, giving $15 or more, and the Community Alliance will send you the book in the mail. In the next year, can you share any new developments that are coming out of each of your organizations? One of the very last slides I give, it will have the contact information for each of your organizations. Many people listening right now would love to hear about the exciting developments that are underway for each of you and your important work. Richard, do you want to start us with developments in the next year for the Ahimsa Collective?
Oh yeah, so us in the next year, well, we have we've just opened up a reentry home here in Oakland that I'm sitting in right now. And so we want to, and it's for men. And our developments for the next year, our goals is like to open another one for women. And I don't know how to do that, but we have some staff that are formerly incarcerated women. I would love for them to figure it out, like, because I don't know. And then like we're opening up a healing center in Santa Cruz for BIPOC people, people of marginalized communities, and people who don't have access to come out to the redwoods and do some healing. And so that's what we're working on right now, and that's what we hope to support and keep supporting, throughout our lifetime, actually, and to keep doing that, keep taking groups up there and figuring out, what it is that you need for healing and supporting that. And so, and giving people access to things. And then we're just moving forward with our RJC process, as restorative justice in the community process, to keep opening that up to more and more. And we're also trying to change systems with trying to get more restorative justice in law enforcement, and like basically taking money and power away from law enforcement and getting the cases they normally wouldn't send to restorative justice sent there. So we can decrease that power and increase the power of the community. And so that's where we're headed. And thank you for letting me talk about that.
Yes, for COSA, in the next year, we hope to give more access to the institutions as well, and be able to go back in and just promote what we have to offer. But also, we COSA's in Fresno, Central California, but we also have COSA in San Diego. We also have COSA in Los Angeles now. Actually, Thursday, I personally picked up and dropped off the first core member. That's the first Los Angeles COSA group is going to start with that core member. And so, yeah, we hope just to expand and just keep branching out in Los Angeles and San Diego. And yeah, and just keep growing and providing more services for individuals that are reentering our society, because we got people who keep coming up, and we're going to welcome them with open arms.
Yeah, I mean, for us, is finding more ways to address the gaps of basic needs, and then being able to have the resources to address those gaps. And so we're the Project Rebound Consortium is heavily focused on that at the moment, and we hope to have some things to kind of address that here soon. Our campus, particularly Sacramento State, is we just rolled out our 4-year degree program inside Folsom Prison this semester. And so the men who are incarcerated at Folsom Prison now have the opportunity to earn a bachelor's in communication studies from Sacramento State. And, they're getting the same academic rigor as the students who are on campus. And so we're really proud about being able to have that rolled out this semester, and then being able to even better is to be able to draw on, like I mentioned, the men earlier from Pelican Bay State Prison who are incarcerated. And we're actually hoping to have the men who were part of that program at Pelican Bay State Prison transferred over to Folsom. And so I think those are for me, those are really big wins, right? To be able to have somebody move down 2 levels to be able to get into higher education. So a lot of exciting things with Project Rebound, and certainly there's more that I cannot discuss, but certainly follow our web pages and keep track of us, because there's a lot of things going on.
Thank you so much. So we are at time and the webinar is shutting us down. So thank you all for your participation, Richard, Jaime, Andrew. And this will be available on YouTube. All attendees will receive an email with the link so they can share it and continue their engagement and their own empowerment and reprogramming. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah.